Well, before we get started on our team, I'd like to address the recent tragic events in our country. I share the anger and frustration that we have witnessed across the country. My thoughts and prayers go out to the family and friends of George Floyd and others who have seen a similar fate. The police brutality and misconduct that occurred in Minneapolis, what has happened in other places in our country, including right here in South Carolina, is unacceptable and needs to stop. Enough is enough. It is sad that in 2020 we're having these conversations. I was very fortunate. My dad was a history teacher, and if we weren't playing sports or watching sports, we were talking about history, and one of his favorite topics was the 1960 Civil Rights Movement. These recent tragic events that have occurred have brought a lot of memories back to me and my dad talking about Dr. King. He admired Dr. King and always talked on how we can learn from our history to help us with our future. So last week, I asked Levy Johnson, who's a friend of mine here in Columbia, to talk with our football team, his son Chris, who's a chaplain for Coach Martin in the basketball, and also Charles Jackson Jr., who runs our spiritual development program. Mr. Johnson was part of the civil rights movements in the 60s. The first thing he talked to our players about was having the right to vote, and that gives you a voice. And we did this as a team on Friday. We went down and registered. Most of our guys registered to vote. A lot did it on the line. But very proud of them to understanding that part of it and hearing that message, which that was the one most important thing he talked about. He also talked about educating yourself from your past. He was the first African-American graduate from the University of South Carolina Law School, the first African-American to be president of the Bar Association here in the state of South Carolina. So he has overcome racism in his life in a first-class manner. He's one of the pillars of our community and how he leads his life, and I thought was really talked in terms of the things that he went through, the adversity that he faced coming up in a very tough time in the 60s. Also, Reverend Charles Jackson Sr., who's been 49 years at Brooklyn Baptist Church, talked to our team as well. He emphasized communicating, a peaceful protest, which we did this Friday as a football team at the governor's mansion at the State House, but continuing to build relationships that break down the barriers that we have in our country. But I think the two words that, as a team that we took from this was educating and communicating. The more you know about somebody, the more you feel comfortable with them, and that's what we've got to continue to do. The two unacceptable words at this time as a team that we talked about was silence and violence. Actions are louder than words. I can put out a paragraph on social media. That does nothing compared to what we did Friday as a football team. But the actions are what we need. We can't be silent about racial inequality at this time. Violence, Dr. King once said, hate begets hate, violence begets violence, and that's still true today. That's not the answer for what we need to do as we continue to move forward. But we're going to continue to educate and communicate our team. I have speakers scheduled throughout the month of June. My father always told me it's easy to do what is right. That means a lot to me. That says a lot about when you're in a time of adversity, when you're in a time of strife, to be able to do what is right, and that's important to me. I would love to one day see our world as a locker room. Doesn't mean we all love each other. That's not true. Doesn't mean we all like each other, but we have respect for each other, and we have respect for the common purpose that we're all coming together for. So those are just my thoughts on some recent events in our country.